Hi, welcome back. Sorry, just a second ago, in the last video, part one, I of this pattern making draping, as I call it, I just butchered a basic pattern into these funny looking shapes, and just recapturing of what I said to you before is that uh, pattern making, a lot of pattern making is actually take the 2D flat surface and transform it into 3D. And just by cutting it apart from each other doesn't make it really that technically advanced. It just looks that way because it's hard to recognize the shapes. Uh, if you would like to drape in that manner, often you have, I would say, in a controlled manner. I'm gonna go to this side. It's easier for me to do it over here using my right hand. Uh, then usually what you get is that you have a lot of seams that runs um, vertically uh, because you need to go through the points, the pivot points. It's not really pivot point, but the center points that makes the shape. If you have a shape out here, you need to, if you have a flat shape here, can actually have an example. If I just take a piece of paper, if you have a flat shape over here, to get it to be more shaped, you have to cut into it, and when you transform the surfaces on top of each other, you actually get a shape of it, or in it. And where should these lines be then? Well, of course, you have to have a line through the bust point. The most normal or traditional way is either the princess line that runs downwards over the bust point, or it could go from the armhole down here, or more uh, of a raglan shape. It's not a raglan shape because that comes from the sleeve, but it could also turn up to the neckline. And the usual neckline seam goes around here, but if you go through it continuously or many times, then you could get the same shape. So you have to think flat. If I have a line up here and it's supposed to transform here, it can't be too wide because then it could not get that shape out. Up here it's actually quite flat, but if you want to continue up here, then again you can't do it too wide. So that's what you're thinking out um, before you start. And a lot of people, they feel the need to have secured the lines. They made a drawing maybe, or you work for somebody who's made a drawing for you, and then you can have bands of fabric. For example, this is just a selvage I just cut off. Then you can have bands of fabric pinned to the dress stand in different ways. For example, this is a little bit too wide because I don't use bands, but you can, for example, pin it in a shape you would like it to have. For example, here, and now you can see I go through the point, the neck intersection, I go to the bust point. Maybe I want a little bit more shapy, so I turn it outwards. And all this is about getting fluid lines, and then I can continue, for example, out here into the side down to the hip line or something like that. It will look like this. What you do have to remember when you do all these seams, and that's a problem with the cutting up pattern making things, is that it can be hard to sew together again. In your imagination, and when you do it in paper, it can be fantastic with hundreds of seams, but when you sew together, it's all wobbly and stretchy and a lot of things like that. But of course, then you can just iron some interfacing on it, and then it got all stiff again and paper-like. So, well, anyhow, when you put your lines on, if you would like lines, then you just start with your fabric as usual. And if you want it to be symmetrical, you just have to start at center front. If you want some asymmetrical thing, you can start wherever you would like. I usually start here over the side and at the shoulder when I do these things. And we have to have an idea how much fabric we need. So I try out here. Let's make a part. And then I just start with a straight line I would like it to have. And of course I have to have enough fabric to transport it up to the shoulder or where I would like it to be. So I put it up here and just put it in place on some critical points. For example, the neck shoulder intersection, that's always a problem area at the shoulder out here. And then I just ease it out, and of course it should not be too tight. That's always the problem usually. You do something, it looks fantastic on dress dummy, you put it on the body and you can't move. So always put extra easing. And then you put some pins that correspond with your line. And here you can see you start to get some it's not so tight anymore, and then you usually have to cut into it. So I cut into here, and then I can shape it. Did you see that? Here it's a little bit, I don't know what's that called, but it's not tight. And then when I cut into it, it opens up like that, and then I can shape it downwards. So you have to have a feeling of what's going on. And then you can see I can transport it into this fantastic design seam that I made. Not so very proud of it, but there you go. And then if I continue out here, I get some excess fabric, and that of course is your bust dot that's out here now. And that's why you have your seam, because we stop this pattern piece here, and then we can put some other fabric over there. And here downwards it's get a little tight, and then when I make a cut into it, it opens up and can be flat. So you just ease it out to your seam over here and up to the neck. Don't use too many pins because you have to remove it ever so quickly. And then if you want to continue up to the neck, again, you have a shape coming on. You think, well, I have to remove something or cut. When it goes outwards, I cut into it. When it goes inwards, I remove some fabric and make it out. Here it goes outwards to the neck, so I make a cut. And then you can see it can follow ever so nicely up to the neck. And here, of course, you have the chin, so there's a lot of things you have to think about, but that's experience, right? You have your chin, you have to be placed for that, so you have to make it a little wider or go outwards, but there you go. And then I can decide how far I can go with this. And that's why I don't like these lines, because I just like to feel whatever where I need my lines. That's what I call randomized draping, which I also rambles on about. But you can see here the fabric cannot lay down flat, so I have to cut into it. So I cut in here until I get it flat, and it goes flat at that point. And then maybe I have to cut a little bit more because the neck is of course round, so it needs more cuts instead of thinking just flat at one point. And then you can see you can get a nice shape up to the neck. I hope you can see this. Otherwise you have to tell me and get to have some more light. And then I can make a shape downwards. And what's interesting now is to see that this actually lays flat over here. And that you didn't know when you did pattern making. Well, maybe we knew a little bit because we saw that the shoulder was flat. But anyway, it's interesting to see what the fabric can do. So I actually can continue my pattern piece here. Drawing, I have to do this lightly, otherwise I'll destroy my dress then. But I have my line here, I can see it through the fabric. Maybe you want a contrasting color in your bands. And then I can just mark it in the shape I would like it to have. And it continues down here. Can you see that? Same shape here. And then on the back, I stop here with the neck up here. And then in the back, I can continue to the cuts I have. And then actually I can do something interesting in the back. I could make a shape downwards, for example. And then I have to make my shoulder. And arm side. And then I had a cut here, so actually I have to go continue out here and down to the side seam. I can just cut it down there. And then I remove the excess fabric. And again, this is just a little bit sketchy, but the whole purpose here was not to be millimeter exact. The purpose is to try some new things and get into the mood of creating. So I cut up here and I cut out my arm side. I cut with sewing allowance in the back. I continue up, and this of course can also be done much preferably on the table, but I want to show you what I'm doing, so I'm trying this. I cut the neckline, and then I cut the shape here beside my pins. I have to do it from, maybe I can do it from this end without cutting into my dress then. The art of cutting. And then you see you get an interesting pattern piece over here. And if you take it off, that's what I said, we shouldn't have too many pins. It would look like this. And now you can start to see the resemblance of the cut up pattern pieces and these ones. They are completely flat. There's no indication of pleats or draping. So that's what why I call it pattern making draping. And then, of course, we're not ready yet. We have to continue, and you have to take it off and on, and that's why it could be, if you're not that trained, it could be very nice to have marks as of where the neckline is. So we do that in a second. And here's why a lot of people want these bands too, because it's easy to put it on and off to the dress then. And here you can see it could be smart to have a marking where the neckline is and maybe the bust dot. And you have tremendously long seams on the bias. It's always good to have some extra markings too. And then we continue to the next piece over here, and we have to measure out how much fabric we need for that. I think this piece would be good, and we want to continue out for a bit. And then, of course, we put it up here again. Now I'm trying to do it without the band, so we can see what happens if you choose that alternative. So I put it here, and you have to realize how much fabric you need over here, because it's supposed to continue all the way. If I do like this to save fabric, of course it's going to be on bias, and that's probably not what we wanted. We usually want them to be thread-like, because that's what you'd like when you pattern make, because everything is straight, mostly anyway. So I probably put it up here, so I have enough fabric to the side, and start pinning into place. And of course I have a problem just at the second I start, because I have something that goes upwards, so I need to cut, right? And then I just have to put some randomized pins over here just to keep it in place, and then I can cut to ease the fabric out. So I can see my markings through here. You probably can't, but I can. So I cut into the neckline, starts to move out up here, and then I can remove some excess fabric. And what's problem too, when you cut in, it always moves around, so you have to cut thread lightly. So I cut in again here, and then I can shape up the neckline on one side. And what you can see here is that, of course, here it's a little bit too wide between the seams, so you probably need to cut down at center front to make an opening. And that's what you realize with the fabric when you stand with it. Then when I open, I can smooth it out ever so lightly up here. And then I pin it in place in my seams. Have it over here. It continues out to the side. And you can see here comes the hip shape. So I have to cut up to the waist. And then it can smooth out. And here it goes over the seam, so you actually get a little dark, but we don't have to do that because we have the seam. And on the other side, I go over to the bust, and then I have the same problem here. So I move in and cut up to the waistline. And then it's all flattened out. And then it's the question what I would like to do here. Maybe I would like to make an open color. I think that would be nice. Or just a split down the front. I think I just use the split down front and mark this side. I have a really high color up here. And I continue along the seam. I have my markings and I continue downwards. I have another marking and continue out to the side to something over there. So it looks like this, and then I cut away the excess fabric. And then we can see that it starts to take a shape. And then of course we have to pin these together. And then I just turn in the fabric and pin them together. Of course, I don't want to pin into the dress stand. I just want to pin the two fabric pieces together, and there will always be adjustments to be done. And then you can continue downwards and try not to get a too pointy bust. You would like fluid lines. Continue downwards into whatever you would like. Down here we think it's a dress or something like that. And you get a perfectly, not perfectly, but a nice shaped curved line. So that's what you can do with draping too. But see, as you can see, it's still very flat. Still is the body shape. And that's the biggest, I would say, difference between original draping, where you just drape the fabric up, and this one where the main goal is to get a body shape. And when I continue up here, I can see that this line would be nicer if I just moved it a little bit. So I pin it a little bit further out. And continue up in the neck area. And then you can see that this could be a nice color that opens up. And over here we could do something asymmetrical. It can go in another shape or what we would like there. And of course you have to mark the waistline. And you can see because it's open here, we need a waistline. If you're wanting to continue, then you should make this more narrow. You could, for example, have a line that came in here and continue over here. So that was a little bit about draping in a pattern making style. This is part 2. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time. Bye.